Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for. For most people around the world, the month of June signifies the official transition to summer. The kids are home from school, the days are longer and hotter, and the community pool and beach are frequent stops. But for Bahamians, June 1st marks what can mean total devastation, the beginning of the hurricane season. For many in this country, hurricanes have become so impactful, they've become measurements of time. 1992 became Hurricane Andrew, 1999 became Hurricane Floyd, and 2004 became Hurricane Francis. These natural occurrences are unavoidable, but while we can't avoid them, we can prepare. The National Emergency Management Agency, or NEMA, has touted the month of June as Preparedness Month, and tonight we sit down with three representatives from the agency to examine just that. Tonight on The Record, we discuss the hurricane season 2019, preparedness and mitigation. It's all on The Record tonight. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
On the Record is brought to you by Alive.
Every time I'm in the Bahamas, I use Rev Go Play.
Got that food. It's packing. Here you come.
Yo.
Wait, Omar coming.
Boy, this Rev Go Play, solid.
Rev, you and us together.
Welcome to On the Record, a balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for.
Passengers who did make it onto those flights no doubt saw the images on the TVs throughout the airport today. The devastation across so many of the islands of the Caribbean. Buildings, homes, hotels wiped away. And there are new images emerging tonight from the British Virgin Islands. They are stunning. Irma has left a trail of devastation there, nothing left of the homes on this hillside. At this hour, the storm is now striking the Bahamas, and ABC's James Longman is right there in Nassau tonight.
Irma's fury, wind and rain pounding the Bahamas tonight as it carves a deadly path towards the US mainland.
The wind is really starting to pick up now, and the eye of Irma is about 200 miles in that direction, but people here have seen what's happened to their neighbouring islands and they're bracing themselves.
The Virgin Islands laid to waste and now dealing with serious flooding. In St. Martin, cars strewn about like toys, trees stripped bare of their leaves. French and Dutch military part of an international aid operation. Turks and Caicos, St. Bart's and St. John, the picture's almost apocalyptic. At least 21 now dead, among them a 2-year-old boy swept away by waters in Barbuda, where a shocking 95% of homes no longer stand. His mother evacuating.
Tomorrow, I'm gone.
Thousands of Americans now stranded.
And I'm doing everything I can to get home.
On Turks and Caicos, Colorado native Kelsey Priests speaking with her family just before Irma struck.
You call, you say goodbye, you tell me you love them. That's all I can do. That's all I can do.
And James Longman joins us tonight from Nassau in the Bahamas. And James, it was last night here we spoke with the Prime Minister of Barbuda, who was extremely worried about this second powerful Hurricane Jose that now may strike Barbuda again after that island was nearly completely destroyed.
Jose David is now at a Category 4, which means 150-mile-per-hour winds. Residents in Barbuda are now being evacuated down to Antigua because it managed to avoid the worst of Irma. As for us here in the Bahamas, we're just going to wait and see what the storm brings.
Late U.S. President Abraham Lincoln has a widely circulated quote that goes, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." The Disaster Management Committee, known as NEMA, knows that hurricane season in the Bahamas requires such a level of preparation. Climate change has assisted in cultivating conditions for much more active seasons, resulting in 2019 becoming the 5th consecutive year to have a named storm outside of the official hurricane season with Andrea, as well as a Category 3 or 3 Category 3 hurricanes consecutively when they're usually 2 years apart, in the form of Joaquin in 2015, Matthew in 2016, and Irma in 2017. Joining us tonight to discuss exactly how we can be prepared are Captain Stephen Russell, Director of NEMA, along with Basil Dean, Deputy Director of the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, and Chief Superintendent Javargo Dames. He's the police communications, he's in charge of police communications with the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Gentlemen, welcome to the show tonight. Welcome to On the Record. Happy to have you here.
Good evening. It's good to be here.
This is a show that we try to do every year because we have deemed it such an important aspect of our existence. As of June 1st, everybody should know, unless you live under a rock, that we are in the hurricane season. Basil, I'm going to begin with you to tell us, in context, what kind of year can we expect? Last year, we were very fortunate. We had no storms, 1 or 2 threats here and there, but nothing serious. And you know, it's always, I always think it's a concern whenever we have a quiet year or a quiet period, that we sort of all relax and sit back and forget what we would have previously gone through. But I want to start by talking about what we can expect this year in terms of the activity within the season.
Well, Jerome, the pre-seasonal indicators suggest that we do have an El Nino in place. And when we have this El Nino phenomena, it tends to create subsidence over the northern hemisphere. And subsidence limit vertical development. And without vertical development, you're not going to get any tropical cyclone forming. So that's one of the good things. The other factor is with the El Nino phenomena, there's also strong upper level wind shears in the mid levels, again, which tends to keep a damper on vertical lift and hence development. And we are seeing that strong vertical wind shear in place as we speak, and hopefully we hope it continues throughout the season. And the other indicator would be the sea surface temperature. Right now it's slightly below normal, which could keep things down a bit, because you know tropical cyclones, they require heat in order to develop. And with below normal sea surface temperature, that's not going to happen. So we have these 3 factors in place, and it all points towards either an average or just slightly above an average season. On an average, we generally see about 12 named storms, and this is based over a 30-year period. Out of the 12, 6 of those usually reach hurricane intensity, and out of those 6 hurricanes, we usually see about 3 of those becoming major hurricanes. So this year, we're looking at some 13 named storms, meaning we're just about 1 above the 30-year average. In the hurricane category, we're looking at about 5 named storms, which is below the 6. And in terms of major storm category 3, we're looking at about 2 of those. So those are the statistics. But despite the numbers, and I tend to say this year after year, it's basically for conversational piece, because at the end of the day, any one storm making landfall makes it a bad year.
For
and
sure.
that is what we certainly are hoping for.
And as I always remind people, there's a reason why it's called a forecast.
Absolutely.
It's not an exact science, and certainly, you know, they're called predictions for a reason.
And not only that, it's a forecast of a forecast.
Yes.
Because even the pre-seasonal indicators, such as the sea surface temperatures, the El Nino and what have you, these are all forecast numbers. And then we have to use those to make the official forecast.
Which can all change.
Absolutely.
Most definitely. Captain Russell, you know, this is the time now when NEMA really begins to take center stage. Although you are an agency that deals with emergencies and national emergencies, this is the time, I think, when most Bahamians really begin to, for lack of a better term, pay attention. to what NEMA is doing. But at this point, where are you with preparations? What happens? I mean, this is the month when you begin to talk. But I would think that, you know, prior to this, there's a lot going on. So from our perspective, help us to understand sort of where NEMA is in terms of preparations for this season.
In terms of preparations, NEMA, we normally start our planning meetings from February, the last February, in the last Friday in every month, beginning in February. We've been having our monthly meetings. So we've had about 4 or 5 meetings so far. But as we go through this week here, particularly our disaster preparedness month, but this week in particular, we have we're going through a simulation exercise now. We have some 30 or 4 government agency representatives who are at NEMA's office this week going through some scenarios, exercises. We are working with a Category 4 hurricane impacting New Providence. That's the scenario that we're working with. 4? A Category 4, yes.
A Category 4?
Yes,
okay.
A Category 4 hurricane impacting New Providence. We have teams from the Pacific Disaster Center who are here with us, the United States Northern Command. So we're going through the exercise and have all government agencies noting what they should be doing to help us get through this particular exercise.
Remind us historically what we would have what the country would have experienced in terms of the Category 4.
Hurricane Andrew was a Category 5. That's back in 1992. Only 5 years. So you probably had a Hurricane Irma, probably Category 4.
We've had about 7 that were
Category 4.
Yes,
so
okay.
we've experienced a 4. So in a 4, and I'm glad you brought that up, in a 4, hitting New Providence, which is always the chief concern because, you know, and I always say to people, I never prepare questions for this show. I spent my whole career covering hurricanes. But when you think of a hurricane, a Category 4, that could hit New Providence, the capital, what could that possibly mean for us? We are the feeder for the rest of the country. Everything originates in New Providence.
Well, let's look at Hurricane Matthew 2016. It's a peculiar part it took. It came through the pathway between Cuba and Haiti and came up. It didn't go across Great Inaga, but it took that track to the northwest and it came up along the tongue of the ocean. Okay, definitely impacting the southern section of New Providence. And the southern section of New Providence was severely impacted.
Devastated in some
devastated.
areas,
When we talk about tidal surge to the order of 12 to 15 feet of water coming ashore. You know,
and people had to evacuate.
So, you know, if based on the direction the storm approaches the New Providence or any of our islands, we have to be mindful of the surge potential, and more so than the wind, because the surge gives us the most destruction. Again, with the Department of Meteorology and the other climatologists, they're able to track these systems quite well. And they give us advance warnings, because I couldn't believe it when they say Hurricane Matthew is going to make this turn and then come north, okay? But they know the science, and we appreciate the science, and once we work closely with them, we're able to advise the public in a timely manner.
But I want to go back to the original question. A 4, and we look at a Matthew, and that was the southern Bahamas. I know of hurricanes that came up on the western side of New Providence that took out that whole. When you talk about a 4, what is the potential impact? And I guess you can jump in as well, Basil. What is the potential impact on a 4 on the city?
Again, a Category 4, because of the surge potential.
Right.
You can expect catastrophic damages, structural failure to buildings, loss of roof, among other things. Okay, where we have homes not built to code, you expect massive destruction to these types of...
And that's just a 4?
A Category 4, yes.
Wow. Okay, and in the country, we have experienced a 5. I mean, those of us who are old enough to remember Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Chief Superintendent, I've got to get you in on this now. We're talking science and all of this, but at the end of the day, it does boil down to people and the effect a hurricane can have. And I always tell people, to me, the hurricane itself is bad, but it's the aftermath where people suffer the most. You know, from the police's perspective, what are you doing in terms of preparation, preparing yourself, preparing your officers, and even the wider public in the event that we have something on such a catastrophic level?
Well, Jerome, thank you for the question. What the police, just as Captain Russell would have said, we too started our preparations very early within the year. The communications technology section is responsible actually for providing two-way radio communications during these hurricanes. And so we ensure that the system is up and running prior to any disaster that may come our way. We checked all of our family islands to make sure that the systems on the family islands are up and running. We check all of our generators to make sure that they're up and running, because it's likely that we will lose power, and so persons will need to have electricity during any disaster. And so we made sure that all of our satellite phones are up and running on the family of islands and in Nassau. We started actually in Nassau with the preparations of all of our communication system, ensuring that the government of the Bahamas system is prepared once we go into the season. We still have some 18 government agencies that's on the government of the Bahamas system that the communication and technology branch is responsible for. And so it is our duty to make sure that before that system is ready, that all of the backups to that system is ready, the UPSs and the generators to that system is ready for anything that may happen.
But I've got to ask though, you're testing them now in June, which is fantastic, glad to hear that. From my experience, August, September, October, we even had, I think, Hurricane Michelle, which was a November hurricane. Are those systems constantly checked throughout these months to ensure that, hey, if we have a hurricane in September, what you checked in June, may not be at the same level in August? And I guess my question is, are they consistently checked, and all of these things checked throughout the actual season itself?
That's correct, Jerome. We make sure that the system there are constant checks on the system. Just last week, we had officers who would have traveled to Eleuthera just to make sure that the systems on Eleuthera was up and running, because we would have had one or two things over there that we needed to correct, knowing that the hurricane season was upon us. And so we sent the team down to Eleuthera to make sure that the system is working down there. And so we are constantly checking to make sure that the system continue to stay up and running during disaster, or even after the hurricane would have passed. Jerome, you can imagine that if you don't have two-way communications during these disasters, it could actually be a real disaster.
That's when the real problem begins,
within Nassau in particular. And so it is the job of our section to make sure that we have constant communications. And even if there may be a failure on some side, that we have backups to these systems. All right? And so with our partners, they also have systems that we can use, that we can ride on in the event that something failed on our end. One of our partners, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, has a system also that we can fail over to. We know that NEMA just would have installed a system also that we can fail over to. And so, Jerome, it is our job to ensure and to coordinate to make sure that all of the relevant agencies have communications during any disaster and actually after disaster.
And you know that's very important. We're at the point of our first break, but I do want to say, it's very important, because we find that sometimes in the aftermath of any kind of disaster or emergency, the one area where we seem to sometimes fall down the most in is communicating. Sometimes a simple message or the lack of proper messaging can really create some problems. So I'm happy to hear that. Obviously, I have lots more questions. We are at the point of our first break in the show. When we come back, more on the record right after this. Sinead.
Yeah, let's go.
Sprained her ankle.
He's live, babe. She just finished watching this movie.
How old was I? 4 days?
She always just play the same in every episode. I don't understand it.
See, what y'all missing is y'all need to get to season 3, man.
I thought
season 1.
They say season 2 is where it started, though.
No, season 3, season 3.
Alive Postpaid. You're there for your friends when it matters, and we're here for you with more data to stream all the shows and movies you love.
Sorry about that, guys.
And I'm the sole heir.
With our letters of notification were returned.
What's it you doing in there, though?
Contacted the county
Come on, man, it's the best part.
For everything that matters. Alive. Believe in best.
This portion of On the Record is brought to you by Generali Insurance Company Limited. your employee benefits specialist.
Welcome back to On the Record, where we are discussing hurricane season 2019 preparedness and mitigation. According to numbers from the Inter-American Development Bank, between 2015 and 2017, cumulative damage by hurricanes that hit the Bahamas caused approximately $678 million in damage and losses. Our guest tonight, Captain Stephen Russell, Director of NEMA, Basil Dean, Deputy Director from the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, and Chief Superintendent Shivargo Dames from Police Communications with the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Captain Russell, NEMA has a tremendous responsibility. You coordinate all of the efforts related to, I guess, preparing and even in the aftermath of a storm. You also communicate to the public what to expect, how to prepare, etc. I remember, when I first started in the business, there was ZNS that sent out information. I mean, we got information from the government, from the meteorology department, from the police. We sent it out. That's how it worked. Nowadays, you have all the private media. You have so many media houses, radio stations that have to be coordinated, and then there is social media. This must create a tremendous challenge for you in terms of disseminating information to the public. People are not focused on any one particular media at any particular time. We're all doing different things. We're all in different spaces. Some people don't even watch television anymore. How challenging is that when you have to now communicate information, particularly when a storm is threatening, or we know for sure that a particular type of storm that can have catastrophic implications is about to hit? How challenging is that now to try and reach the entire population?
Well, it is a challenge, but we do have the support of the Bahamas Information Services. We have a representative that is on staff, our public information officer to NEMA. And she, Lindsay Thompson, she assists us with coordinating those efforts. When we need a press briefing, she'll bring the entire press together, make sure they have that common bit of information instead of bits and pieces. So we try to make sure either through messages that we would script and send out to them, all the media houses, that they have the same information, or we invite them in for the press briefings to make sure they have that same information. ZNS has a space in NEMA's office where they can do live broadcasts from.
As the official broadcast.
As the official broadcast. So we encourage that. The social media, again, Lindsay Thompson, we have a team, we call a UB Tech Squad from the university. They are part of our program to help us get our messages out through the social media platform.
And that's encouraging, because a lot of people exist and get information on social media, but by and large, you also have a lot of misinformation that happens. And sometimes there's erroneous information. There's, sometimes I look at information and I say to myself, now, from my own experience, I know this is garbage. But how do you even deal with that?
Yes, we're well aware that once we see something that is not coming from NEMA or misinformation, we try and get it on as quickly as possible to provide the correct information pertaining to a matter.
Basil, from what you do, from the forecasting side, from the meteorology side, again, we are inundated with so many different sources of information. People are watching South Florida. They're watching, the stations out of South Florida, which are obviously focused on any storm that's in this area. You've got huge networks like CNN. You've got such a deluge of information that's coming in from television, but also from social media. People are, I have friends who I call them storm trackers. They're on social media, constantly updating and providing information. Again, sometimes there is conflicting information that's coming in. How do you, particularly from the consumer side, how do we remain focused on what's happening and that's relevant to us?
Well, Jerome, first of all, with respect to the media houses, CNN, what it be the television stations in South Florida, they're going to give you general information about the hurricane. We are mandated by the Bahamas government to provide hurricane information for its entire citizenry. And as you know, the Bahamas is an archipelago comprising of several major islands and keys, and each one of those are expecting information from us. So it's important that citizens of the Bahamas pay attention to what comes out of the Department of Meteorology. Over the past few years, we've been having some challenges, of course, with our social media, and these are what we call fake news. So because there's so much information out there on the wide internet that persons can pull down satellite pictures from 10, 15 years ago and post them as though they are current information. But one of the things that we advise persons to look for is a time and date stamp. The Department of Meteorology, whenever we issue any kind of statement on any weather phenomena, it always carries a date and it carries a time. And most of the fake information that I've seen over the years, if you look very closely at them, they are void of date and time stamps. So those are some of the things that you should be looking for moving through this tropical cyclone season. If you don't see a date or time stamp on it, dismiss it.
And the information people can find as well themselves on social media, correct? I mean, there is information, for instance, you can go on NEMA's site and get, etc. Okay, so even that aside, I know over the years we've had this conversation that you may watch a South Florida station and they're focused on South Florida. The Bahamas looks like this, and then the rest of the map is Florida. And it's something that you've said over the years, and I say to people as well, these stations are forecasting for their viewership. You are forecasting for the Bahamas. And I think sometimes we miss that. We don't quite get that because we're thinking, oh, well, they're showing a different picture than we are.
Again, the other thing that really puts us at a disadvantage is the coverage that we give. For example, most of the newscasts, one newscast in a 24-hour cycle.
Yes.
Whereas with South Florida, you get in a hit every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes, which kind of draw the viewership. So those are some of the things that we will have to look for, look towards in time as to increasing the amount of either television and radio coverage that we get.
I'm glad you said that, because I would encourage my media colleagues to move to more comprehensive coverage as opposed to the once or twice a day, which of course does skew, because by the time we come on in the evening, you've been hearing forecasts all day long,
and they would have forgotten what you would have said 24 hours ago.
Exactly. From the police side, I always say that disasters can bring out the best and the worst in us. The best in that we can come together when it's important, but when there's a crisis, sometimes people really go into self-preservation mode, and that's a polite way of putting it sometimes, how we behave. But in your preparation and training, do you consider now, when we move from simple normal behavior to self-preservation and we become different animals, and I don't want to use that in a derogatory way, but we become different people, either when the storm is approaching or in the aftermath?
And that's correct, Jerome, and we have seen that where persons will actually try to take advantage of the situation. But we want to assure the Bahamian people that the police will be up and about. Of course, our duties are to preserve life and property. We'll be out there as much as we can, as the weather would permit, for us to be out there and to help protect the Bahamian people from those persons who may be trying to do things like looting out there. It is our duties to help to prevent that. But we can only do that, Jerome, as I've said, as much as the weather permits us to do. All right, so we have to make sure that we are securing ourselves also to make sure that we are preserving our lives, so that after the fact that we can go out there and assist the public. But we want to say to the public, and to persons out there who might have things like that in mind, and not to take advantage of the situation that is happening, to remember that we are all Bahamians. And we have to live within our country, and we have to do our best to preserve our country and try to help one another, not to try to tear down one another.
And the person you snatched the ice from today, you have to see them tomorrow.
Exactly.
But one of the things that has become a bit more pervasive in the last few years, you mentioned Hurricane Matthew, and even since then, has been this situation of evacuations. In the last hurricane, people were actually evacuated from islands and brought to New Providence out of harm's way. I've got to ask, is that something that we will see continuing? In the past, my own personal experience in the aftermath is you find people in almost desperate situations because they would have decided to ride out a storm. But will we see now more mandatory evacuations?
Well, mandatory evacuations, it has to be passed through Parliament, or an Act of Parliament. As we stand now, we're going to have to continue to look at the voluntary evacuation concept, okay? Once we know that a storm is going to impact one of our communities, a major storm, and we definitely want to bring those vulnerable persons out of communities. Definitely your senior citizens and probably young kids, because God forbid we have had them in those islands with Hurricane Irma, we would have had some major fatalities or injuries. So
and even the infirmed. Eh?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we have refined our evacuation policy, okay, and the plan would be to bring persons out of areas if we have these major storms coming through again. We have arrangements with our airline companies. We have shelters on standby. We've had made contact with food companies, water companies to make provisions for us. I want to say thank you again to the hotels with Hurricane Irma. In 2017, the two major hotel properties came through in a tremendous way and support the feeding program with the shelters, so that helped us tremendously. But we have a plan of action in place if there is a need to evacuate again, God forbid, this year.
And now this becomes my issue. You will send out the order for voluntary evacuation.
Yes.
People will not heed that, and they will stay. Whether they stay on the island or whether they stay at their homes in New Providence, wherever. And then the storm hits, and it becomes a life and death situation. Now suddenly, the police, defense force, and whomever else is available has to go into rescue.
Again, we will not put the law enforcement officers or rescuers in harm's way, okay? We know when winds in excess of 40 miles per hour, certain things shut down. The ambulance services, the bridges shut down, and we try not to have vehicles on the street with winds in excess of 40 miles per hour. So we would not send responders out to try and rescue somebody who refused to leave when the initial warnings to evacuate were issued. We would not do it.
And so, you know, it's good for people to understand if you take that position that you are going to stay, you are on your own.
Yes.
A lot of people, though, will say, I don't want to leave my house. I don't want to leave my possessions. I worked a lifetime to get all these things. And, you know, if something happens, I want to be here to protect. When you hear people say that, you know, how do you now persuade them to leave that home and leave those possessions that are seemingly so important?
You know, Jerome, we have had the experience through several hurricanes where we actually had to leave and go out and to assist persons.
I know. That's why I brought this issue up. Many people
put ourselves in danger.
Yes, leave your families, etc., and risk your own lives.
Exactly, to assist members of the public. We have done that, Jerome, and we have learned our lessons from that. We definitely realize that, you know, if something were to happen to us, you know, I have 3 young girls and a son, you know, Jerome, and if something were to happen to me, I'd leave them behind.
And you've already left them in service to your job during this period.
Exactly.
Police don't stay home. Defense force don't stay home.
So what we do, Jerome, in the force, and the commissioner has mandated, is that once we know and we get the reports from the med officers and from NEMA that something is coming our way, we go to our residents, and we secure our residents, we secure our families. There were one incident, Jerome, where I had to take my family to a location with me just to ensure that they were safe. And so you can imagine, after doing all of that, you get a call from a member of the public that they did not heed the warning, and now you have to leave your secure space to go out and assist them. You know, it's quite hard, and I don't think that it should happen that way. And so, you know, we want to say to the public that when you do get the warnings to leave your residence, no matter what you have, you should leave, because they're only material things and they can be replaced. You cannot replace a life. And so it's unfair for you to put the law enforcement agencies, or want them to put their lives in danger to come out and save you because you did not heed the warning.
Basil, at what point, at what point do we look at evacuations in the storm? What category of a storm, and then what are some of the some of the conditions that mandate evacuations?
Well, Jerome, NEMA generally would make that call. We would provide the scientific data in terms of the wind speeds, potential for storm surge, and the likes. For example, during Matthew, you would recall, like Captain Russell give you the tracking of that system. That hurricane tread through the waters just between Cuba and Hispaniola, because we generally rely on Hispaniola and Cuba
to break up
the storm system.
Comes over the mountain.
That particular Hurricane Matthew actually made that trek between those two land masses, maintaining its intensity, intensifying for a while before dropping down to a Category 3 as it passed through most of the Bahamas. For us here in New Providence, again, we were extremely lucky, but it's the closest that New Providence came to a direct hit by a major hurricane.
Really?
And again, that same Matthew thread right between New Providence and North Andros. So we were on the outskirts of that system, and you saw the level of damage that took place here in New Providence, in particularly the storm surge, which is something we have never experienced before. And the reason being, Matthew came from the south. And to the south of New Providence, we have the Great Bahama Bank. And the shallower the water, and the stronger the winds, the greater the storm surge is going to be. For the most part, we generally experience hurricanes that comes from the east, which is deep ocean waters to the east of the Bahamas. Hence, we don't get as much storm surge as we would have gotten with Matthew. So I'm hoping that Matthew would have been a lesson for us here in New Providence to highlight the fact that tropical storms, hurricanes can be very, very deadly in terms of the storm surge if we were to have a major impact. Also, the Bahamas is a very hot spot for landfall in terms of tropical cyclones. We have 3 islands in the Bahamas, you may not know it, that rank among the top 10 within the North Atlantic Basin.
Which 3? And
the 3 would be Andros, which has experienced some 57 landfall in the past 150 years.
Wow.
Followed by Abaco, which experienced 56.
Abaco, I can believe, yes.
And Grand Bahama with 55.
And
they rank.
Andros surprised me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right. But Andros usually get the storms from the east, from the south, and from the southwest. So anything coming up the Gulf of Mexico, like Michelle, for example, in 2001, came right across Andros before moving near Providence, and then again across Eleuthera. So I say all of that to say this: in every 2.5 years, there's some part of the Bahamas that's impacted by either a tropical storm or a hurricane.
Good statistics.
New Providence ranked 39th on that list. So it shows you how kind of protective we are, and I think that's one of the reasons why persons in New Providence tends to be a little bit more relaxed as opposed to persons in the Family Island, who tend to get a little bit more.
We always think that we're out of harm's way here, and we're going to be okay. Gentlemen, we've got to take another break. If you are enjoying our discussion tonight, stay tuned. Our show continues right after this break. Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true, and open debate they've been looking for.
And the icon goes to On the Record.
On the Record was born out of a desire to do something different. What we do every day helps our country, it helps our society, it helps to shape the views and opinions.
Gentlemen, we've got to move very quickly. Let's wrap up. It's all On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
Phone is good. Internet is good. TV is good. But why just pick one thing when you can have everything with Tria? Only $99 a month gets you phone, internet, and cable. That's everything you need for $99 a month. Ask for Tria. Call 601-2200 or email residentialsales@cablebahamas.com. Rev, you and us together.
Gearing up for what is predicted to be a season with an average of 9 to 15 named storms. 4 to 8 of those are expected to intensify to hurricane strength, with a chance of 2 to 4 becoming major storms, Category 3 or higher. We are discussing how to prepare for the hurricane season this year. I'm here with guest Captain Stephen Russell, meteorologist Basil Dean, and Chief Superintendent Shivago Dames. Gentlemen, this, as we have said at the beginning of the show, is expected to be possibly lower than average, possibly another good year for us. And anytime we don't get hit by a storm in any way, it's a good year. After last year's experience of having no real threats, no storms, it would seem that, you know, we seem to forget very quickly. We get very relaxed, very soon, and immediately forget what would have happened. Again, how do you keep people engaged? How do you say to a public that has not had a storm in a year, and sometimes it goes for longer than this, you know, 2-3 years sometimes. How do you keep a public engaged to remain vigilant and to really pay attention? Anyone?
Well, let me just remind the viewing audience that we have seen an increase in tropical cyclone activity, particularly in the Bahamas. 2015, we had Joaquin, which impacted the southeast Bahamas and parts of the central Bahamas. The year following that, 2016, we were hit by Matthew, which impacted again New Providence and Andros, and particularly Grand Bahama, where the eye actually passed over western Grand Bahama. And then just in 2017, we had Irma, which devastated Ragged Island. So that's 3 years back to back that we have seen major hurricanes impact the Bahamas. There's also climate change, which is impacting the development of tropical cyclone. We're seeing more intense tropical cyclone. We are now beginning to see an increase in the frequency of these hurricanes visiting the Bahamas. So we say all of that to say this, and based on the numbers I gave you earlier in terms of 3 of our islands being in the top 10, it tells us that the Bahamas is a hot spot. So preparedness is the key. Right, the hazards of wind, rain, and storm surge will always be with hurricanes, so we have to keep those things to the fore of our minds and remember that we have been doing this thing now for decades, and we realize that it's the little simple things that keep you safe from the storm.
I'm glad you said that, Captain Russell. We talk about simple things in preparation. We sit and we go, okay, well, I'm good now, and then we hear a storm is coming, and then there's a race to prepare. And, you know, like for me, I start cutting trees down from, you know, May. I start looking around, but, you know, having been in the forefront of this, I think I have a little different perspective. But, you know, people sit back and they go, I'll wait. And why is that a dangerous thing? And then also, you know, you don't want to sort of buy cases of things and just have them sitting around. But, you know, when you think of we're in a hurricane belt, obviously we are in the strike zone. We've seen the frequency, climate change. All of these things are indicators that we are still very vulnerable. So when you talk to the public, particularly at this time, what do you say to them to get people to always be vigilant and be prepared? And then what kinds of things should we be doing, even if it's just low level?
Well, at the household level versus the corporations and government level, you notice that BEC, they're doing the tree trimming, water and sewage, and municipal works, they're cleaning, they have fellas cleaning drains over the past 2-3 months. So they're starting their process of making sure the drains and trees are trimmed properly from around lines. But we say to persons in their homes, as they go about their weekly or monthly shopping, just get those small little bits of items, your batteries and your searchlights, candles to a less extent, but if you can, go and put them in your little storage space. You can call your hurricane kit or box, okay? Likewise, make sure you get those plastic bags that you can put important documents. I was distressed when Hurricane Matthew impacted New Providence, and I went to homes and I saw the best of certificates and documents in the grass laying about trying to get some sun to dry because people fail to put these key documents in plastic containers. Likewise, I travel to schools and to churches and you see the best of the stereo equipment and other speaker systems all damaged because people fail to secure these items. So at the household level, you get your personal hurricane supplies. In homes, you find ways to protect or elevate your furniture if necessary. In the schools, and school may be on the break, but you must have somebody who is standing by to can quickly go and secure the equipment, particularly computers and those equipment in the human resource or economics rooms, secure those goods. In churches, your records, among other things, the speaker systems, clinics, distress likewise, you're seeing the best of equipment lay waste. We need to find ways of securing our equipment. We need to simply reduce the amount of damages and losses as a result of hurricanes. Like, so we've been through this drill for almost 2 decades, from Hurricane Matthew 92 to 2017, almost 17 or more major storms. We should be a resilient people now. We know a storm is coming. We have almost 7 days lead time. we track these from the come up the coast.
Yeah, we only wait until 24 hours to
Okay,
really get
yes.
serious.
But we should be tracking them. You know, you should be preparing like now for what may come later in the year. So that's our message. As we go through our disaster preparedness month of June, our theme is Be Prepared Bahamas. Okay, because we have been through these drills. We've seen storms year after year, and not just the hurricanes. Some are now producing tornadoes. So that's another factor to these whole scenarios. Okay, and they can the tornadoes can produce extensive damages to properties throughout the islands.
One of the things you didn't mention, which is very important too, is even from the business perspective and business continuity.
Yes.
And what, you know, I don't know how many businesses or business owners think about what's going to happen to my business should we have a storm. What's going to happen to my employees? Important records, pay, things of that nature, having access to cash. You know, how important is that even from a business perspective?
Yes, most certainly. We have intensified our speaking engagements to some banks and other corporations. Again, sharing with them the concept of business continuity as to what they can do to safeguard their records, look after their staff, and make sure they can bounce forward instead of back. They say bounce forward now. Immediately after the storm, you can salvage what is there and move on with your operations. We find most businesses that are not prepared, they go out of business after storm.
That's true.
They go out of
Especially
business.
the smaller ones.
The smaller ones. So we encourage them to have those basic essential items or equipment, either generators and other things that would enable them to get up and running as quickly as possible after a storm.
Very important. And then even looking out for your employees.
Yes, most certainly.
That's important. Superintendent, Chief Superintendent, I want to bring this in as well. As we are preparing to secure our homes, criminals are also preparing as well. It is no secret that you all have arrested and even charged people who have taken advantage of the situation. So as we are preparing now for the storm, we have to think of some other things as well, eh?
That's for sure, Jerome, and that's exactly what the force is doing. Because as I've said earlier, Jerome, we know that in times like this, that criminals tend to take advantage of the situation that may be happening. And so, again, we want to ensure members of the public that the police will be out there trying to do its best as much as our weather would permit us to do so. So we want to ask you to make sure that you are securing your homes, securing your businesses with those CCTV cameras that can possibly help, especially if you know the current goes off, you may have a backup generator that will help us actually to be able to gather that evidence that we needed to prosecute persons after the storm would have passed. So do your best to make sure that you're doing things to help the police in the event that your businesses or your homes do get breaking into. And Jerome, also I want to say for the elderly persons, I think that persons need to ensure that they have a plan to secure those elderly persons.
Elderly and sick and infirm, right? Because sometimes you may have people at home who aren't able to walk or different things like that.
Exactly. I think a lot of times that persons wait for something to be upon them before they try to devise that plan within their heads as how they're going to actually secure these elderly persons. And so please make sure that you have a plan in place, that you will know from A to Z exactly what you will do in the event that you have to move the sick or elderly persons.
And I've got to ask that because sometimes you may be in a situation where you're unable to take care of someone. You may be the sole provider in the home, and are there services available if you have someone who is bedridden or someone who is convalescing, or you may have a situation where you have someone in the home and you just don't know what to do. Yep. Are there agencies available who can help with these things?
There are a number of elderly homes that are out there that are available to assist, and so it will be best for you to find out where those locations are.
And find out now.
And find out now, exactly, where those locations are, so that you can move those persons to safe haven if you have to do so.
Good advice. And unfortunately, these are things that we don't think about until the storm is upon us, until you find yourself in a crisis situation. So, I'm glad to the point that all of you made, that to think now, to plan.
Exactly.
Look around your home, look around and see what things need to be secured, what situations and scenarios that could happen, and think your way through.
And if I may add, Jerome, securing your home is key. And there are some simple things that we need to do to ensure that our homes are secure. First and foremost, windows and doors. We ask you to board up windows and doors for a reason. When you have winds in excess of 40 miles per hour, flying debris becomes an issue. And if your windows and doors are shattered, then your family exposed to the elements of strong winds and rain. Those strong winds, when they begin to seep through narrow passages, create what we call raven wind. And those raven wind creates extensive pressure on the inside of your building, which cannot penetrate the walls, so that wind has to go somewhere. It's either going up or it's going down. Cannot penetrate the floor. So the first thing to go is your roof. That's provided your roof is not secured. So those hurricane straps, they are very, 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 very important. We should ensure that during construction that we adhere to the building codes. That's on the window and door side of it. If you live in a hurricane, in a zone that is prone to flooding, you need to know these things prior to the hurricane season. If you are living in an area that is prone to flooding, you want to ensure that you know where the nearest hurricane shelter is. In the event that rainfall becomes a major issue, flooding becomes an issue, you and your family know where to go. So again, family planning is very key, but securing your property is the first defense in preparedness.
Good advice. If you are enjoying tonight's show, and as I've said, if you think this is an interesting discussion, be sure to stay with us. We've got one more segment to go. We're going to be back right after this. Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true, and open debate they've been looking for.
And the icon goes to On the Record.
On the Record was born out of a desire to do something different. What we do every day helps our country, it helps our society, it helps to shape the views and opinions.
Listen, what is more dangerous? Gentlemen, we've got to move very quickly. Let's wrap up. It's all On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break. This is our final segment. We are talking about the 2019 hurricane season with an esteemed panel of guests. Gentlemen, we're just about out of time, so we're going to wrap up quickly. Chief Superintendent, I'm going to start with you. What takeaways do you want the public to have from this show tonight? What kinds of things do people need to be mindful of as we now ride out this it seems to be sometimes very long, 6 months into this hurricane season. But what are some of the takeaways you want to leave people with tonight?
Jerome, I want the public to know that the Royal Bahamas Police Force, under the leadership of Mr. Anthony Ferguson, Commissioner of Police, that we are making every preparation for this hurricane season to make sure that we are ready for anything that may come upon us, and that the police force stands ready to assist the members of the public, again, where the weather would permit us to do. The police force is also responsible for ESF2 on the NEMA, which is the communication section. As I've said, we have some 18 government agencies riding on our two-way radio communication system. The public can be assured that that system has been tested, continue to be tested, that anything that may come upon us, you can be assured that there will be communications. All of our satellite phones in Nassau and in the Family Islands have been tested. All of our generator systems has been tested and will continue to be tested to make sure that we are ready. And so again, I just want the public to know that we stand ready, willing and able to assist with anything that may come our way.
That should really give us a level of comfort to know that the chief law enforcement agency in the country is ready, and that's good news. And of course, we'll be watching to make sure you are. Basil Dean, and I gotta say, Basil and I go way back. Most of what I know from hurricanes is from spending endless hours on a desk together covering hurricanes, and I want to thank you. I tell people I know hurricanes like the back of my hand, and I owe that in no small measure to you and in the guidance that you've given us over the years. Yours is not an easy job. People are very critical of you sometimes, and sometimes I come to your defense and say, it is a forecast, it is on predictions, and sometimes we get caught up, I think, in the small things without understanding, or looking at the bigger picture. Storms are erratic; they move very differently. You forecast, you predict, but things change. From where you sit today, what types of things now do we need to be mindful of, and how prepared is the Met Office? I think that's one of the concerns. How prepared are you and your team in ensuring that the people in Acklins and Crooked Island and Long Island and Exuma and Grand Bahama, Abaco, New Providence, Andros, all over, how prepared are you in making sure that each island, is dealt with individually, and we understand that while we're sitting here in New Providence, what's happening in Acklins and Crooked Island, or what's happening in Andros or Abaco, how are we all connected, and how prepared are you in keeping us up to date on what is happening in the unlikely event that we have a storm this year?
Jerome, I'm glad you brought it up. As we said, the Bahamas is an archipelago.
Yes, we forget that sometimes.
A great challenge for
we think Nassau is it.
And the challenge simply is this: because we're not forecasting for one single landmass, makes it a great problem. We're dealing with individual islands that has individual communities, and each of those communities within those islands want special attention. And unfortunately, we can't do that for each and every one of them. And hence, we divide the Bahamas up into three zones: the Northwest, the Central, and the Southeast Bahamas. That is the reason for the Northwest, Central, and Southeast Bahamas, so that we can focus on a great area that groups certain islands together. And the key is for persons who live in those zones to know exactly what zone you live in. That's the
So first thing, know your geography.
Absolutely.
Okay,
right?
that's one.
And that will help greatly. In terms of the preparedness of the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, I must say we are well prepared. Training is something that is ongoing. We're continuing to ensure that our staff are up to speed with the latest technology. The infrastructure of the Met Department is being improved as we speak. There's the installation of Doppler weather radars, yes, the installation of automatic weather stations throughout the Family of Islands, which will improve the data collection in years to come. So I see things looking pretty much on the uptick in terms of what we will be able to do moving forward. So the coverage will be there. The radars will now cover the entire Bahamas, something we've never had before.
So this is the first time we have radar.
A plus. And so when it comes to flood forecasting, those type of things, picking up tornadic activities, the Doppler weather radars will certainly be a help there. But in the broader scheme of things, we still make use of the satellites that orbit some 23,000 miles above the Earth. That gives us a greater coverage, so we're able to pick these storms up from off the African coast.
As you are monitoring them, those of us, the media, the public, are we able to see that in real time as well, or how does that work, or is that just information that you are privy to?
At the end of the exercise, the improvement of our infrastructure, that will be available to the public. It's not available to the public as yet, but from an operational perspective, my forecasters and what have you.
You all see what's going on.
Absolutely.
Well, at least that gives you some level of comfort to know that you all know what's going on. So eventually we'll be a part of that. Catherine Russell, I'm going to leave off with you now. From NEMA's perspective, are you comfortable with where we are in terms of our readiness and our preparedness? Is there still some work to do? Or are you satisfied that in a week's time, if we're under threat, we're ready?
Yes, if something does occur within a week's time, we are ready. I'm comfortable with the state of preparedness and our response mechanism if something is to occur now, in terms of not just New Providence, but in every island where there's an administrator and their local disaster committees, they are prepared to respond to what may come this hurricane season or any other form of man-made and natural disasters. We are also part of the wider Caribbean. We are part of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDIMA, which is based in Bridgetown, Barbados. 18 countries. We've signed an agreement that if any one of our countries are impacted, once a request is made, teams will come to respond to us, as necessary.
So we're not in this alone.
So we're not in alone. Just the regional body, and then we are part of the wider international body. We have partners throughout the world who are standing by to come to assist us once a request is made for assistance.
Exactly.
Again, it all boils down to the individual households, your businesses, and sectors being prepared to respond.
Dr. Nussel, thank you very much for coming on. I'd also like to thank you other gentlemen. You know, hurricanes, and I say this over and over, this is the one show where I don't prepare any questions. And that's because it's second nature to me in so many ways, and it's so important and there's so much to talk about. We could have sat here for another hour and talk. But certainly our job tonight was just to give people a glimpse into the work that's being done and to remind them that even though we've had a quiet year, there's always a threat, there is always the potential for the storm. So there is always a need to be ready. And as we've said over and over, you know, you don't wait until you hear the call. But even now, there's smaller, low-level preparations that you can be doing. And just the awareness of it, I think a lot of times can go a long way. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. My good friend Basil, keep up the good work. Listen, I think sometimes you get a very unfair rap.
Let me leave this last word with you.
Sure.
A good forecast becomes a bad forecast when you fail to heed the warning in that forecast.
Good stuff. No, nothing else needed to be said. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We hope that you've enjoyed our show tonight. Special thanks to my guests, Captain Stephen Russell, Basil Dean, and Chief Superintendent Zhivargo Dames, my producer and technical staff. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.